Pain relief often feels immediate. A headache softens, muscles loosen, inflammation settles. Within an hour, discomfort that once demanded your attention can fade into the background, which is precisely why painkillers became one of the most commonly used medications in the world. But inside the body, relief is only part of the story, because the moment a pill dissolves, your biology shifts into processing mode. Most painkillers, whether it is ibuprofen or acetaminophen, are treated by the body as active chemical signals. Helpful ones, certainly, but signals that must be carefully broken down, neutralized, and cleared. This responsibility falls largely on the liver, an organ designed to filter the bloodstream with remarkable precision. Under occasional use, the system performs beautifully. Enzymes dismantle the medication into safer compounds, which are then prepared for removal. You never notice this work, but when painkillers are taken too frequently, something subtle begins to change. Instead of processing an occasional visitor, the liver is asked to manage a steady chemical workload, day after day. At first, the body adapts. It increases enzyme activity. It accelerates detox pathways. It works harder without complaint, yet biology always has thresholds. A hepatologist once explained it this way: the liver is extraordinarily resilient, but it is not indifferent to repetition. What makes this important is that stress inside the liver rarely produces early symptoms. There is no immediate alarm, no sharp signal telling you the organ is under strain. Everything can feel normal until the workload begins generating byproducts the body would prefer not to accumulate. Because when certain painkillers are processed in excess, the liver may produce small amounts of a compound that is far less friendly to human cells. And how the body handles that compound is where physicians begin paying closer attention, because relief on the surface does not always reflect what your organs are quietly managing beneath it. One of the liver's most important roles is chemical protection. Every substance you swallow is evaluated, transformed, and prepared for safe removal. Most of the time, this process is smooth, almost elegant in its efficiency, but certain painkillers require a more delicate handling pathway. Take acetaminophen, for example. When processed in normal amounts, the majority is converted into harmless compounds. Yet a small portion is transformed into a highly reactive byproduct known as NAPK. Under healthy conditions, the body immediately neutralizes this compound using a protective antioxidant called glutathione. You could think of glutathione as the liver's internal shield. As long as that shield remains plentiful, cells stay protected. But when painkillers are taken too often, or in higher than recommended amounts, glutathione stores can begin to thin, the shield weakens. And when that happens, the reactive compound is no longer fully contained. Instead, it may begin interacting with liver cells themselves. Not dramatically at first, not always with symptoms, but biologically, this is where physicians grow cautious. A liver specialist once summarized it quietly: toxicity rarely starts with catastrophe. It starts with overwhelmed defenses. What makes the liver unique is its capacity to regenerate. Given time and reduced workload, it can often repair mild stress remarkably well. Yet the key variable is repetition, because the more frequently the liver is asked to manage chemical strain, the less recovery time it receives between exposures. And while the liver is often the organ people associate with medication stress, it is not the only one filtering your bloodstream. Another organ works continuously, hour after hour, to regulate fluid balance and remove dissolved waste. And certain painkillers can subtly alter how that system receives blood, because the next effects are less about detoxification and more about circulation inside one of your body's most sensitive filtration networks. While the liver transforms chemicals, the kidneys perform a different kind of precision work. Every half hour or so, these two organs filter your entire blood supply, regulating electrolytes, balancing fluids, and removing microscopic waste your body no longer needs. To do this effectively, the kidneys depend on steady, well-regulated blood flow. And this is where certain painkillers begin influencing physiology in a quieter way. Medications such as ibuprofen and naproxen belong to a class known as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. They relieve pain by reducing the production of signaling molecules called prostaglandins, compounds involved in inflammation, fever, and discomfort. But prostaglandins have another responsibility many people never hear about. They help maintain adequate blood flow into the kidneys. When these molecules are repeatedly suppressed, the tiny vessels feeding the kidneys may narrow slightly. For most healthy individuals using these medications occasionally, the effect is temporary and well tolerated. Yet with frequent use, especially alongside dehydration or existing health strain, the kidneys can receive less circulation than they prefer. Not enough to trigger immediate pain, just enough to reduce filtration efficiency. A nephrologist once explained it with careful simplicity. The kidneys perform best when blood arrives generously. Restrict that flow, and their workload becomes heavier. What makes this important is subtlety. Early kidney stress rarely announces itself clearly. Changes often appear first in laboratory values rather than physical sensation, and because the body is skilled at compensating, many people remain unaware that their filtration system is working harder than usual. But circulation is only part of the story. Because painkillers do more than influence blood flow, they also interact directly with one of the body's most sensitive protective linings, a surface designed to withstand food, acid, and digestive enzymes, yet surprisingly vulnerable to repeated chemical interference. Because the next effects often begin in a place many people associate with painkillers themselves, the stomach. Your stomach is engineered for resilience. Every day it holds highly acidic fluid strong enough to break down food and neutralize harmful microbes. Yet the stomach does not digest itself because it is lined with a specialized protective mucus barrier. This lining acts as a biological shield, separating delicate tissue from corrosive acid. But certain painkillers can gradually influence this defense. Medications within the nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, NSAID, reduce inflammation by limiting the production of prostaglandins, the same signaling molecules we discussed earlier. Here is what many people never realize. Prostaglandins also help maintain the stomach's protective mucus and support healthy blood flow within the stomach wall. When their levels drop repeatedly, that barrier may grow thinner. Not suddenly, not always painfully, but biologically more exposed. A gastroenterologist once described it this way: the stomach tolerates acid well, as long as its protective coat remains intact. Without that full protection, irritation becomes more likely. Some individuals begin noticing subtle warning signs: increased stomach sensitivity, mild burning sensations, nausea after medication, unusual discomfort on an empty stomach in more advanced cases. Physicians monitor for conditions such as gastritis, inflammation of the stomach lining, or even peptic ulcer disease, where small sores can form in areas no longer fully shielded. What makes this especially important is repetition. Occasional use rarely overwhelms the stomach's defenses. But frequent exposure gives tissue less time to restore its protective layer. Yet the influence of painkillers is not limited to digestion, because beyond organs and linings, these medications also interact with a system that governs how blood moves through your vessels, a system deeply connected to cardiovascular stability. And when certain chemical signals are altered repeatedly, the balance within that system can begin to shift, because the next effects are less about discomfort and more about how smoothly blood travels through the body itself. Beyond pain relief and inflammation control, the body carefully regulates how blood moves through its vessels, widening when more flow is needed, narrowing when pressure must be maintained. This balance is partially guided by biochemical messengers, including prostaglandins. When certain painkillers repeatedly suppress these signals, vascular behavior can change in subtle ways. Blood vessels may become slightly less flexible, and fluid regulation can shift, sometimes encouraging the body to retain more sodium and water than usual. For most healthy individuals using medication occasionally, this adjustment is temporary. But with frequent use, physicians sometimes observe patterns such as mild blood pressure elevation or increased cardiovascular strain, particularly in those already managing risk factors. A cardiology researcher once noted, "The circulatory system prefers equilibrium. Repeated chemical interference, even when helpful for pain, can gently disturb that balance." This does not mean painkillers are inherently unsafe. Far from it. When used as directed, they remain among modern medicine's most effective tools for restoring comfort and function. The concern arises when occasionally becomes routine because the body is exceptionally adaptive. It rarely signals strain immediately. Organs compensate. Systems recalibrate. Physiology continues forward, often without obvious symptoms, until the cumulative workload becomes harder to ignore, which leads to a perspective many clinicians quietly share with their patients. Pain relief should never come at the cost of long-term physiological harmony. The reassuring truth is that the body responds well to thoughtful use, following recommended dosing, allowing recovery time between medications, and consulting a medical professional when pain becomes frequent all help preserve the balance your organs work continuously to maintain. After all, medications are designed to support the body, not silently burden it. And once you understand what your systems are managing beneath the surface, a more useful question begins to emerge. Not simply does this remove the pain, but how often is my body being asked to absorb the chemistry behind that relief?